What's up, everybody? It's your girl Dominic Alexandria coming back with you with another video. And y'all, oh my goodness, so I had recorded this other video basically explaining the same thing, my journey to social work, and I edited the video, I uploaded on YouTube, and I think when I tried to download the actual video so I can upload it to my YouTube channel, something came very corrupted with the file and I couldn't do it. And I was just really pissed because it takes a lot to edit the videos, being patient with downloading it to your computer, then uploading it onto YouTube. It's very time consuming, y'all. And I was just so irritated. And if y'all know me, y'all know it takes, for me personally, a mental strength to actually record these videos. I have to be in the perfect mood to feel like, hey, I'm gonna record something today. So anyways, y'all, I just want to give you that little, quick story time. But how are y'all doing? So for today's video, I'm going to break it up into two parts. So for part one, I'm going to be discussing my social work journey on the academia side. And then when I get into part two, I'll be mainly discussing the work history and my social work journey or pathway, however you want to say it. All right, so let's get into today's video. So my social work journey. So for those who don't know, I am a licensed clinical social worker. I graduated from University of South Carolina in 2017 with my master's degree in social work. My concentration was health and mental health. So my pathway to social work was, I feel like it came naturally to me. So I knew when I started my undergraduate program, so I have a BS in psychology. I knew when I started my undergraduate program, I wanted to do something in the mental health field, right? And at the time, I did believe that, hey, after I graduate with my degree in psychology undergrad, I can go on and get a PhD in psychology and I'll be perfect, right? But getting to PhD programs in psychology they're really competitive, first of all, especially if you're a person who just graduated from undergrad with no experience whatsoever, no research experience especially. It's very tough to get into those, reputable schools too. So I decided to go against getting my psychology degree because, of course, at the time I wasn't ready. And at the time too, I was trying to decide what will be my best pathway because I really did have a passion for mental health. During my undergraduate program, I was a research assistant at a child abuse program based out of Norfolk, Virginia. And I can't tell you to a T what I did as a research assistant. I just remember I was collecting certain types of data where it involves the children describing the abuse that occurred, and there was a pet therapy dog in the room with them while they're talking to a forensic interviewer. And I was supposed to, I guess, monitor or observe the children's interactions with the dog. I think that's the best way to put it, right? I was supposed to tally up, for instance, how many times did the child pet the dog. That's all I remember. But anyways, it was just so long ago. It was I did that in 2013, so that was 10 years ago. Holy crap. Next year, y'all, is my 10-year anniversary from graduating from college. Okay, let's get back on track. So anyways, at that child abuse center, the therapists were all licensed clinical social workers. So I'm like, oh my gosh, I can get my foot in the mental health door if I were to be a social worker. Because I, of course, talked to them about their career trajectory, how did they get there, and what could you do as a LCSW. I'm gonna say LCSW because it's faster than saying licensed clinical social worker. All right, so anyways, I was like, oh my goodness, I'm gonna go pursue my social work degree. So I filled out a whole bunch of graduate applications, and I mean by a whole bunch of graduate applications, I filled out 4. I applied to Norfolk State University in Norfolk, Virginia, Virginia Commonwealth University in Richmond, Virginia, George Mason University in Fairfax, Virginia, and a unicorn, University of South Carolina and Columbia, South Carolina. And the reason why I applied to USC is because they had a military concentration for their social work program, and I feel like that aligns perfect with my career aspirations because I want to be a mental health professional in the military. And if y'all watched my last video, you would know that. Anyway, so I applied to all 4 of those universities and got accepted into all 4. And just to reiterate, I graduated from my undergraduate program, Old Dominion University in Norfolk, Virginia, in 2014, the fall. So like December 2014. And I want to say in February 2015, that's when the acceptance letters started rolling in for these schools to start their programs in the fall of 2015. So I first got accepted to VCU. I was so excited. I remember because y'all, I had the flu and I was just so sick. I was like sick as a dog. I lost 8 pounds when I had the flu. And I remember feeling like I was like on my deathbed and I was checking my email and I get this email from this VCU MSW admissions rep. Was he MSW admissions rep, or was he an admissions rep for the general graduate school? I don't remember, but anyways, I get an email from an admissions rep from VCU saying, congratulations, you've been accepted. I was screaming, I was like, yay! And then I regretted it like a few minutes later because I was so weak. I was weak as a dog. So they started rolling it. I got accepted to all 4 schools. So essentially, initially, I committed to VCU first. They had a really great program throughout the state of Virginia. And I would say each school had their pros and cons. Like the pros for George Mason University is near the DC, Maryland area. Opportunities could be endless for me. But I know at the time of the con was they're just starting their MSW program. So whenever you're starting something new, whether it's a business, starting a new business, you're gonna have some nuances here and there. That's as expected. It can be a little bit disorganized when you're starting out. Norfolk State University, again, the tuition was cheaper. It was the cheapest out of all the 4 schools that I applied to. However, I wanted to get away from my hometown area because I'm from the 757 Hampton Roads, Virginia Beach, Virginia specifically. So I wanted to get away, experience something different. And so, yeah, that's number 3. So University of South Carolina, of course, that's far from Virginia, but not too far. It's like drivable distance. However, it's not like down the street either. So it was out of state, and I don't know, I feel like it had great new beginnings and it had that military concentration. However, of course, a con was, since it is out of state, you're gonna be expected to pay out of state tuition. So that's why I decided to go with VCU initially. So I wanna say maybe a month or a month and a half after I accepted VCU's admission, USC said I can receive in-state tuition because I was granted a graduate assistantship for the program, their MSW program. So I weighed all the pros and cons from VCU to USC. And of course, essentially what I decided to go with is USC because I really wanted to get out of Virginia. I wanted to experience something new. And again, have that military social work concentration I was really excited for. So I moved to South Carolina August of 2015 and started my program that same month. I have no regrets at all to this day. So this is like 8 years later. I have no regrets going to USC. I thought it was a really great opportunity. I met a lot of awesome people in my cohort. The program to me was exceptional. It wasn't too easy. In fact, I felt like it was challenging, and that's what you want. You want something that's challenging. Like if you watch or keep up with current events, especially what they're saying about University of Southern California, their online MSW format is not as challenging as those who are receiving the education in person. So I was very thankful. I decided actually not to get the military concentration. I'm not gonna go too deep into it because it is a personal reason. It has to deal with a professor. Anyways, USC had 5 different concentrations within their MSW program. They had health and mental health, which is what I decided to go for. Aging. I'm not sure it was named aging or geriatrics. It was one of those 2, but it had to do with older people, of course. Then policy, so that macro focus, the military concentration, and children, youth, and family. So yes, it had 5 different clinical concentrations. I shouldn't say clinical concentrations. It had 5 different social work concentrations because, of course, when you're doing policy, that's not clinical. That's not micro work. It's macro, which is focusing on a larger scale of social work, if that makes sense. Most programs either have clinical or that non-clinical track, which the non-clinical track, like I mentioned, is that, social macro policy development stuff, which I think is really interesting. Honestly, once I retire, I would love to do policy work. Health and mental health, it's basically that clinical concentration, because I knew after I graduated from grad school, I wanted to first practice social work from a micro perspective. So I was working with individuals, groups, and families. I did the 2-year program because I did not come in with a bachelor's degree in social work, so I could not do what's called the advanced standing route. So I did the 2-year program. So that first year is like your foundation year. That's getting you familiarized with social work practice, social work theories. And then the second year is like that concentration year. So what are you specializing in? Health and mental health. So for my first year, because in order to graduate, you have to do 2 practicums. First practicum is during your first year. The second practicum is during your second year. Makes sense, right? So for my first year, I did my practicum at an elementary school. I was with a social worker, and it was actually kind of interesting. So he was a LMSW, licensed master social worker, based out of a school. He had his own classroom, and he was tasked with management of children who were classified as emotionally disturbed. So looking back in hindsight, now that I'm a professional myself, basically these were children with some sort of developmental disorders that can be found disruptive in the classroom. I'm talking about your oppositional defiant disorders. One only had autism. She was very high functioning. Unfortunately, 2, since they're classified emotionally disturbed with behavioral issues in the classroom, when they're with their regular class and teachers, they stick them with who was my supervisor, my social work supervisor at the time, to be able to help manage those behaviors. But I don't know, so all the kids, from what I recall, but one kid, all had what's called adverse childhood experiences. They all had something traumatic happen to them. And then again, all but one kid were Black. They were either Black or they were biracial, like half Black and half white is what I gathered from meeting and speaking with their parents. So yes, you want to be able to manage their behaviors, but we had to address the elephant in the room. There's a reason why these kids are acting this way. Because the mornings we had like 4th and 5th graders, and maybe a sprinkle of 3rd graders, and then the afternoons we'll have the 2nd and 3rd graders. And I have my own personal views when it comes to how we teach our kids in classrooms, because it's coming from a very Eurocentric perspective that may not work for kids from different type of ethnic backgrounds. I know it didn't for me growing up, since I grew up in a predominantly white school, and my specific learning style was not adaptive to what was being taught in schools. It honestly made me feel kind of dumb. But I was able to graduate from a predominantly white institution, USC, with a 4.0 GPA for my master's. That's a whole different subject, y'all. So I still have issues with that, doing that practicum. Not issues in terms of, it was very valuable experience. However, I do not feel the schools were meeting these children's needs, because they're not addressing these children's traumatic experiences into more in depth, is what I'm trying to say. It's like, yes, we're going to take them out of the classroom, stick them to another classroom with other emotionally disturbed kids who had traumatic experiences, and we're going to have the social worker figure it out. But he's not doing counseling with them. It was mainly like, let me help you with your school. It was just, I don't know. I feel like it was a disservice. I hope by now they changed their approach with addressing children with some sort of behavioral issues. by now, but I don't know. So anyways, I'm very passionate about that because I do like kids. And again, I feel like those kids were not getting all their needs met. All right, so let's move on. So my second year, I did my practicum at a state psychiatric facility. I was able to get paid because I was awarded a fellowship. It was like a health profession scholars fellowship. It was like 10 grand. I was like, I'll take any kind of money I need. Shit, I'm a broke grad student. Anyways, so it was at a state psychiatric facility. And that was not my first real experience when interacting with those with any sort of severely mentally illnesses, because undergrad, not only did I do a research assistantship at a child abuse program, but I also did a practicum at a adult day center for those with severe mental illnesses. So we call them SMI. That range from like schizophrenia, schizoaffective, bipolar, severe depression, etc. So this was not my first experience with interacting with those who were considered SMI. However, this was my first experience interacting with those with SMI on the inpatient basis, because the adult day program was considered outpatient. So for this practicum, I learned a lot. That I had no regrets. Initially, of course, since I wanted to do this military track, I figured maybe I could get a practicum at a military facility. So I did interview at the VA. I think it was for like a renal dialysis, social work student. And I did not get in, unfortunately. And there was no other positions that were offering any sort of interviews for social work interns for me. But it's okay, because it all worked out, because obviously now I'm in the military myself. But anyways, the state psychiatric hospital, I learned a lot. I learned a lot professionally, not only with working with those who were considered SMI, but honestly being able to stand up for myself and advocate for myself when interacting with peers. Not peers from a social work student perspective, however, working with those in a interdisciplinary team. So at that time, it was the psychiatrist, or it was a nurse practitioner whose specialty is psychiatric medicine, nurses from all different levels. So we had, of course, nurse practitioners, MSNs, we had RNs, BSNs, and LPNs. The behavioral health techs were there. There were LPCs as well. They call them psychologists. That was their title, but they weren't actual psychologists. They were literally LPCs. And I'm not trying to downplay their role. It's just funny that they refer to as psychologists, but they weren't psychologists, if that makes sense. They were LPCs. Of course, how could I forget the most important people? Social workers, because social workers not only helped with admissions, discharge planning, but we also ran groups. We'll meet with the individual patients as well for sessions, not just therapy sessions, but also discussing their discharge plans and, making it clinical as possible too. It was nice. It was such a good time. So most of those people in that psychiatric facility were found NGRI, which stands for not guilty by reason of insanity. So they were charged with a crime. However, because of their mental health condition, they were found NGRI. So most of the population that I worked with were, they had some sort of psychotic disorder like schizophrenia, mood disorder like bipolar disorder, depression. But I want to say a good chunk of people I saw, it was on the psychotic end. And it's just amazing to me how medicine can be so powerful, right? Because when the patient would initially come in or first admitted, they're very psychotic. And by the time it was ready for them to discharge from the facility, because I worked in the acute unit, so, they're not there for no more than a month, typically, case by case basis. It's amazing to me once they get that medicine in their system, just how much of a different person they are. It's like a complete 180. It was quite amazing to see and definitely hopeful. However, the drawback to that is oftentimes, and I saw it more so for the younger population. So late teens, early 20s, like this is like their first psychotic break or first experiencing these kinds of symptoms. They don't want to necessarily believe that they have a serious, severe mental disorder, really. So once they get that medicine in their system, they think they're cured and they stop taking that medicine. And then next thing you know, they're right back in the hospital. And it could be an endless cycle for a lot of people throughout the rest of their life, unfortunately. Because they're, again, people in their 50s, 60s, running to the same pattern. They're not taking their medicine. They're not doing their aftercare treatment. They are, it's just this endless cycle, which is unfortunate. But as a student, I help with the discharge planning because unfortunately too, and again, this goes to larger policies, right, of how our nation addresses mental health issues, right? Unfortunately, a lot of these patients don't have the support, they don't have a supportive spouse, they don't have a supportive family, they don't have the adequate income to be able to live and thrive. So oftentimes the social workers, we had to find, facilities that would accept these patients. When I mean by facilities, some of them were nursing homes, others were group homes, and then, majority was nursing homes, unfortunately. But at the time too, I don't know how other states are doing it, but in South Carolina, they have like this, you can consider like a foster care program, but for adults with severe mental health issues. People who, want to be able to help a mentally ill person thrive in society, they'll take them in, let them live in their house. The state pays for that, the state will pay for that. So they'll pay the person who's fostering the mentally ill person and whatnot. And the foster parent, I know they're not called foster parents, they're called something, I just can't think of it right now. They were just tasked to ensure, hey, going to the appointments, going to any sort of meetings, if they're able to have a job and support them in finding a job and taking them to their job. So it's like a foster parent, it's like fostering, right? So I think we had like one, when I was there, like one success story from that. Because unfortunately, and again, it goes back to larger policies, right? When you have someone who just doesn't want to comply with their treatment plan, there's only so much the foster parent can do, right? And then eventually they are back in the cycle and the foster parent can say, I don't want to accept this person back into my house, and they have the right to do so. So yes, there's drawbacks in everything. So yeah, discharge planning, I did some groups, so that was very interesting because where I was, the acute unit it's a wide range population, 18 and up, and for it to be considered acute, there were people who were there for years. And I think they did that because maybe they wouldn't thrive in the long-term unit. I don't know. I don't remember. I just know it was considered acute, but you really had everybody and anybody. Like, we had a geriatric unit, but we also had geriatric folks in the acute unit. So anyways, I'm just saying that because when running groups, since you have such a wide population, even a different kind of population with different education backgrounds, it can make running groups difficult. And also too, a wide population in terms of mental health diagnoses as well. So what I may be able to facilitate a group in, let's say, healthy coping skills, it may work for someone who just has major depressive disorder. It may not work for somebody who has a severe form of schizophrenia, unfortunately. That's just the way it is. Unless they are good on their medications. But oftentimes what I found was a lot of the patients too, their education background was like no high school diploma, maybe nothing past middle school, and can't read. So that's what I mean by wide population, if that makes sense. So I did groups, so that was a good time. Did discharge planning. And yeah, it was a really great experience just reflecting back. Like I said from earlier, I learned a lot professionally, advocate for myself as a professional because I did have somebody try to come for me or just talk really down on me. Not my social work supervisor, she was awesome, but it was one of her coworkers, and it was a couple of them too, because they feel like just because you're a social work intern, you're like below, right? You're just bottom of the barrel. So my favorite saying is we gonna figure this out, right? So I got that figured out, and that person or persons no longer talk to me as if I was below the gutter, right? I was, talked to as a professional because this is my last year of my grad program. I could have accepted an offer at that facility to, to work there after I graduated. So again, treat people with kindness, no matter at what stage they are in their life, because you never know when you might see this person again in the future. I graduated from USC May 2017 with my master's in social work, concentration, health and mental health. And yeah, certain classes that I took, of course, like I mentioned, during your first year, you have those foundation social work courses. I don't remember too much about the courses I took my second year. I had to look at my transcripts. I knew right off the bat I want to get my license, my clinical license. So I looked at my state requirements in order to achieve that. So I already knew during my grad program I was going to move back to Virginia because the social work salaries in South Carolina are a little bit discouraging. Things could change. Yes, they could have changed right now. However, at the time, I knew at the time I would have had a happier life back in Virginia, but I decided to move to Charlottesville. But anyways, that's reserved for part 2. I remember I took Psychopathology. That's the only class I remember taking, y'all. I'm so sorry. I literally would have to look at my transcript to see what classes did I take. All I just remember was I looked at my state requirements, Board of Social Work for Virginia, to see kind of how can I get approved to sit in for supervision and what classes would I need to take. All right, so that is the end of today's video. Like this video, comment, share, whatnot. You know the typical script for these things. And be on the lookout for part 2. It'll probably be uploaded next week. That's what I'm aiming for, y'all. So please work with me. And part 2 would discuss my social work journey after receiving the MSW and what my professional work experience looks like. So until then, y'all have a good one. Happy Juneteenth.